Ladies and gentlemen, I've really been looking forward to this conversation with Professor Larry Kramer, the President and Vice Chancellor of the London School of Economics. He's a superb podcast guest, and he sits at the intersection of democracy, free speech, elite institutions, economic growth, AI, geopolitics, and the future of education. So I hope this will be fun, provocative, a little bit stimulating, but very human, because that's the thing I found when I met Larry, that we had very human conversations, real, genuine, authentic conversations. So, Larry, it's lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be here. And thank you for that introduction. Gosh, I wish my mom heard it.
Well, you're also, I'm very grateful to you because you jet around the world as the president and vice chancellor of the LSE. And so you never quite know which time zone you're in. So you're working very hard. So thank you for making the time.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Okay. Well, look, I think the first question is leadership and your personal journey. I think you've moved between Stanford Law School, the Hewlett Foundation, and now LSE. What has leading such different institutions taught you about leadership? And what have you had to unlearn?
Yeah. So, they're very different institutions, but I mean, I think the first thing is the sort of core things you want to do if you want to have some success is the same. So there's obvious things, I think, the standard leadership lessons, right? Transparency, honesty, the willingness to actually deal with people as humans and not let their kind of institutional interests, your institutional interests, supersede the fact that you're actually just dealing with people. I think the main lesson I learned is patience. So if you have ideas and plans and things that you want to get done, you really need to be patient for people to come along with you. You can't force them through. And if they're not coming and they don't come, you have to back off. Unless they're truly, truly central. But, the idea is keep in mind your long-term goals, keep in mind the need to be pragmatic. And so be patient with people, compromise where you need to, and so on. So that's patience, compromise, transparency, honesty, humanness.
Yeah. And in those three different institutions that you're in, did you find, I mean, we're always learning. We're what they call beta. We're in constantly work in progress. Did you find you had to change your leadership style between them, or is it this is me, take me or leave me?
A bit of both, I would say. I mean, certainly you have to be you. One of the things I found is it's less what you say or do than who you are. That as you're in an institution long enough, it just sort of seeps into the institution. That's just what follows from the position. It's not necessarily any individual, anybody in that role. If they're there for a while, that'll happen. So, yeah, I think I would just say, I think I would say that.
Yeah. Now, I've been reading a lot and studying a lot around sort of authoritarianism, the age of the strongman. And I think it's very interesting when you look at the sort of 12 lessons from the Nazi mind. One of the things they did was unhinge the universities, really just take them apart. And we're seeing that in some countries. So if you don't want democracy and if you want authoritarianism, one man rule, universities and democracies, what's the one thing you think universities still get badly wrong about defending democracy today?
Yeah, I wouldn't say still get badly wrong. I think there are two traps you can fall into from the perspective of a university and democracy. So, and the two traps are you can lose your sense of what democracy actually is, which is to say it's a field in which there has to be room for different views and different ideas. Obviously, there are some things that are outside the bounds of legitimate democratic debate, but those boundaries are pretty far out there. And within those boundaries, you have to have room and respect and preserve room for all of the disagreement to take place. So obviously one thing that universities can get wrong is losing that sensibility and becoming not necessarily such democratic institutions themselves.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing universities can get wrong as institutions is speaking up then about the issues as institutions. So there's a set of institutions that are about how the university runs itself. Its values themselves need to embody democracy, and they do. So anytime there's an attack from the outside or an effort by government to interfere with universities that directly threatens those things, the university obviously needs to take a position. But on the general issues in society, as soon as the university begins to take positions, it begins to lose its own mission. It begins to lose the capacity to have that kind of free, open, democratic debate inside the institution, because people who are at odds with the position of the institution itself don't necessarily any longer feel fully comfortable expressing their views. So what you're trying to do as an institution is preserve that space for real debate and exchange of all sorts of different kinds of issues, and not interfere with it either by internally or externally planting a flag on one side or the other of controversial issues. It's hard to do.
Yeah, I'm smiling as you're saying this, because there have been a number of universities that I've done leadership work with. And it is one of the bits I find the most challenging, because you get a group of deans and professors and you say, right, here's a particular psychometric. Well, hang on. I'm not sure I agree with the underpinning psychology and the background of this. I question it, and so it is like herding cats, because everybody begins to sort of start unpicking what you're suggesting, or a particular philosophy or a way or an approach, which is healthy, but it also makes it jolly hard to garner a sense of direction and alignment. Do you find that?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, famously, right? I think the expression herding cats was invented for universities. But again, there's a difference between, there should be that on the substantive issues that are the subject of people's work.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges you have as a university is it's easy enough to say we won't take positions. But then the additional thing is, are we doing things that ensure that there is a robust debate happening on campus? Or while we're not taking the position, it's the campus itself, the people on the campus. Have they either all gone to one side, or is one side acting in ways that make people on the other side, reluctant or feel afraid to speak? So, having a robust debate, you can't have it if the university is taking positions, but you may not have it even if the university isn't. And then it's, what do you do as a university to ensure that? So take your example. It'd be great if people are disagreeing about that sort of thing. That's what we're here for. It would be bad if one side felt that way, but felt that they couldn't speak, because if they did, something bad was going to happen to them. Not necessarily a university punishment, but maybe they're going to get called out on social media, or they're going to get ostracized by their colleagues, or they're going to get, violent protests from people who oppose what they do, and now that's not happening because they're not speaking. Well, that's not good either. So the real challenge is that one, right? Preserving a genuine, robust debate while you're not taking positions in a world that is highly, highly polarized.
Yeah. And I think in your role, it must be quite hard to hear it all. I was sort of brought up with the Quakers, where you listen to the feeling of the room, and then the leader has to make a decision, a proposal of what we do going forward. And of course, you then set off on that one. Then people, well, actually, I'm not sure I agree. So they start to unravel the jumper, and so all the wool gets unraveled. You're left with the collar. I mean,
but again, that happens. Say there's a difference in issues about institutional governance. Should we have this department or that department? Should we start this program or that program? You want and expect that. And again, that requires patience. Back to the first question you asked, in bringing people along and coming to a point where you can move forward without having to shove it down people's throats. So that goes with the territory, and that's okay. That's good. That's, as the leader, you have to embrace that, not just, again, it's when you get beyond issues about how we run ourselves and into just issues about the world that we all feel strongly about. I mean, for me, one of the interesting things is how many people assume that if you're not taking a position, you're taking the opposite position of theirs. They just assume that because they assume anybody would take a position, because they assume that the substantive values on positions is more important to you or to anyone than institutional values themselves. I mean, the way I think about it, we all have a hierarchy of values. And anytime a higher one comes into conflict with a lower one, the higher one's going to win. So the question is, how important in your hierarchy of values, if you're in a leadership position in a university, is the idea of institutional restraint in speaking? It's not neutrality. It's restraint. I'm not going to speak because I'm saving space for the rest of you. And people don't necessarily believe that that's so. And where they come to believe that it's not so is because you do it on some issues and not others. So you have to give this value a really high priority and be prepared to say, I'm subordinating my own views on issues in order to, because of my institutional role. I don't actually personally find that all that difficult.
Yeah, and you've reminded me of that, the need for paradox in many ways, that on the one hand you're this, but on the other hand that, and that a higher level of intelligence is often being able to hold two contradictory views at the same time and be able to live with those. What's your view?
Well, I don't want to call it a higher level of intelligence, but because look, I was trained as a lawyer, right? And one of the things all lawyer role is built into being a lawyer. You're representing a client. You may not agree with that client. You're a criminal defense lawyer. You're representing someone you may believe is guilty. You can put that aside and play your role. And it's like, it's not saying anything about you as a person when you do that, unless someone says, well, I think this is so important that even roles should be subordinated to it. And then it's a question of, well, these institutions are important. And if we all do that, these institutions can't function anymore. If defense lawyers stop defending their clients because they know they're guilty, then the system then won't work for defending the ones where you're not sure, and the ones who aren't, right? Then you've lost something really essential. So if you can understand that larger picture, then you can play your role. And it's the same thing in this kind of position in the university.
You make me smile, because at the moment, as we're discussing this, we've got Mr. Burnham up in Manchester, who 1 minute was saying we should rejoin the European Union, and the next minute, about a week later, he's saying no, we shouldn't be in the European Union. You go, okay, and then you got the Vice President of America who goes, Trump's he's Adolf Hitler, he's terrible, and then he goes and works for him. And you go, yeah, okay, that's extreme versions of saying one thing and then doing completely the opposite.
Although I hate to say it, I can't speak for the UK case, but certainly in the US case, that's not a question of role. That's just a question of naked personal ambition.
Yes.
Right. That's like, I actually will sell my soul in order to get this position.
Yeah.
And, like, that is very different from what I'm talking about. I've had moments in controversies in all of the institutions I've been in when I have felt very strongly about something and nevertheless not expressed myself, and felt badly mostly that people would assume, as I said at the beginning, that I actually had the opposite position of the one that I did, and I couldn't explain to them. But again, it's, as I said, that's not what JD Vance is doing.
No.
I can't speak for Burnham.
No, and of course, it goes back to your point originally. I was going to say, are universities becoming too cautious about speaking hard truths? And as you say, you really got to be careful on when a university takes a particular point on it. But maybe leaders in a university, are they becoming more cautious about speaking hard truths, particularly when you see the authoritarian regime coming on in America, in certain places around the world? Hungary is like this, where people in academia feel they couldn't speak out because they would be prosecuted or persecuted, or it would be over.
Yeah. So, I mean, that you ask a really hard question, which is, okay, Kramer, that's a fine position, but isn't there a point at which the threat to the society is large enough that the university should speak out, because it is an important institution in the society? And I do think there is such a point. It's pretty far out, and you have to be careful because it's so easy. That is one of those slopes that can become quite slippery.
Yeah.
And then you're back to suddenly, because you've taken a position there, why not here? Why not here? Why not here? And then you're into the mess. So, now again, there's a different thing from saying, even though the university isn't going to speak, we are going to fiercely defend the rights of our academics to speak. And to the extent that the administration wants to attack the institution, that is one of the places where we can and must speak. Right. But imagine a government that's trying to turn itself into an autocracy that leaves the universities alone. Right. That's the hard case. Once you're being attacked yourselves, of course you can and should speak out, right? These institutions are important. It's a classic effort to undermine democracy, to try and undermine these institutions. We need to remind you why, and we need to protect ourselves, and you need to help protect us. That's a perfectly fine thing. If we're being left alone, but every other institution is being, and then it's like, oh, do I still stick to that, institutional restraint thing? Certainly I have to defend the right of my people to speak on it. And when do I need to speak out myself? I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
Yeah.
And that's the point. It's not easy because there is a point
Yeah.
where I suppose it would be incumbent on you. Not because you want to, though. That's the other thing. It's not a self-indulgent thing, and it's not that people need to know who I am. It's that it's still the role question. It's just in this role, because of this institution's role in society, now I do need to speak out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been interesting in the last few years with the more authoritarian anti-democratic regime in America that's going on, where some universities spoke out but then got penalized financially, and others chose to go with the flow of whatever was happening to them.
And mostly still got penalized just a little more subtly.
Yeah.
And in the long run, the universities, I think, there that spoke out will end up better off for it. It's like the same thing with the law firms.
Yes. Yes.
But again, there they had to speak out because they were under direct attack. I mean, the interesting incident there was when the Trump administration put out this compact they offered to a group of universities to sign. We'll give you all the support and money, and all you have to do is agree to these principles. And one of them was, you'll support conservative faculty and principles, and you would have thought all 7 universities the day after they got that letter would have said no. And it took a while, but that's fine. I guess they really needed to think hard about how to play it. But one university said maybe, and one didn't answer. The others then just flatly said no. And those 2 universities, that says something I think really terrible about them.
I think so. Because this is about moral quotient. And back to a topic that you know well, and it's partly what you've spoken about already, but just a little bit more depth: free speech, polarization, and courage. A university expect to be a place both of free expression and emotional safety. Here we've got the age of polarization, post-truth, populism. Where do you draw the line? What truths do universities nowadays have the courage to say out loud, really?
Yeah. So again, universities don't speak, just remind on that. But, with respect, universities are not supposed to be places of psychological safety. They're not. When our students come in, part of my speech, the opening speech is recorded because we don't have a single space for all of them, is when you come here, you should expect to encounter people who say things that you violently disagree with, things that challenge your identity, things that disgust you, things that really, really challenge you. And if that's not happening, we're failing you.
Oh, right. Okay.
Our job is to teach you how to deal with that constructively.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. And that's a very different thing. And so what I would say is this isn't supposed to be a place of psychological safety, so tough it out. That's not the right answer either. Our answer is the way to educate you, because you're going to encounter it when you leave here, is not to shield you from it then, but then to help you learn how to deal with it constructively. And that means how to learn from it, how to teach back to people who, you think are violently wrong, how to do those 2 things in ways that still recognize that we're all part of a community. It includes teaching people as speakers to maybe be a little more thoughtful about how they express themselves, so not to do it in ways that are going to be heard and felt as offensive, or certainly not to do it just to poke someone in the eye. But by the same token, when it happens, because it will happen, teaching people to be a little more resilient and not think that what I need to do is run to daddy and say, protect me from this. And so that's our responsibility as universities.
I find that wonderfully refreshing. And I'm thinking about the sort of helicopter parents who want to protect little Donna and little Michael. The nasty people shouldn't be saying those things to you, and I'll protect you. And then suddenly they go out into the real world. Hey, wake up, kid. You're on, Navy SEAL selection here, and the sergeant will shout at you. He will not be nice to you. Get in the surf. What are you doing? And I think too, it's really mature to say, look, you're going to meet people who are very different from you. You can't change them, but you can change your thoughts and your own actions, not to fit in with them, but just to cope with them. Because life is, what was it? Life is difficult. It's about that, the road less traveled. Life is difficult. When you accept that life is difficult, get over it, then you get on with it and you find ways of coping with it. And I think with all my reading lately about impermanence, the Buddhists, non-attachment, and an equanimity when all this is going on around you, how you can manage it. Doesn't mean you agree with it, but at least you understand that you're going to meet people who are very different from you. And there's that old Christian principle, treat your neighbor as yourself. No, someone said to me, don't treat your neighbor as you want to be treated, because they're different from you. Treat them as they would like to be treated. And I don't know what your views are on just what I've said.
Yeah, no, basically, yes. I mean, I think I agree with that. I mean, again, one of the best reasons to come to a place like LSE is the unbelievable diversity of people you'll encounter. We have people from typically 140 to 150 countries in every class. And so it's not just the kind of familiar lines from Western society. You're going to encounter like really, really different ways of thinking about things and approaching things and dealing with people. And that's a fantastic growth experience for people.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. And as this recording, it's going out to about 150 different countries. So, people are listening to this. They may not agree with you and I at all.
Yeah. So, yeah. But then come and let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's have a discussion about it. So let's talk about that kind of thing, talent, merit, and who gets missed. I'm interested, what kind of unconventional, creative, or highly capable people do elite institutions still unintentionally shut out simply because they don't fit the traditional mold?
Yeah. So I got to talk here to speak about the US and the UK because they're very different in this respect. In the US, the way admissions are done is actually used to be fantastically wonderful for capturing those people because you'd be able to put in so much information and show who you are and what was unique and different about you. And we really did look for like finding those people who were wild. One of my favorite stories, it's apocryphal, of course, was, a kid where one of the essays from a particular school was, what's the most courageous thing you've ever done? And the answer was, F you. And I thought, and of course they let him in, right? It's such a brilliant answer. And, so as I say, I'm sure that's apocryphal, but you'd look for those kinds of people. And then so what's happened over a generation is, as everything got more competitive, I suppose, and then that fed back down to parents and children, they've been building resumes since they were like 4 years old. And so now the kids who tend to get in are the ones who've done a sort of lot of, who they're incredibly impressive, but in very kind of conventional ways. Mm. They've done all the right kinds of public service and community work and gotten the right grades and done the right extracurriculars and done the right volunteer work. And you don't know if it's real or not. But they're so impressive on paper that you let them in. So you may be losing. I used to say to my dean of admissions at Stanford, she was very much along that line. And I would say, when I was in college, I didn't do any of that stuff. We hung out at bars and drank beer and talked about the meaning of life and philosophy. And I think we were actually pretty interesting. And none of us would get in today. And so so I think that's what's happened in the US.
Yeah.
The UK, it's very different because the UK application process essentially gives you no information on people.
All right.
So we all use this UCAS system where you have like test scores, some grades, not the trend of grades, just final grades. You've got one letter of reference. That's all that's allowed. You've got 3 short essays now. That's all that's allowed, which means you effectively have no information. And so, you get above a certain numbers threshold, and the reality is it's virtually a lottery at that point. Although, admissions offices are trying to make really fine individuated distinctions, but they have so little information to do it on. So I can't even say who the UK universities are missing. Maybe a lottery gets you actually a real mix of people. I mean, I can say, as I say, the student body we end up with here at LSE is extraordinary that way. But some of it is just built into the fact that they're coming from 140 different countries. If is an issue for us, it's that we don't have the resources to give out scholarships anywhere near the level we need to. So there is one for the non-UK students. You're going to have to be from a family that has money or from a country that provides support, or even if we want you and you want to come, you won't be able to do it. So there's a class piece that we need to deal with, and the way to deal with it, which is something we're trying to do very hard, is build a substantial scholarship endowment so that we can run a needs blind admissions process and still get kids from 140 countries, but also from the whole array of class and privilege.
Yeah, no, I love that. And taking back to your earlier point about the selection process and how you want to get the ones who are a little bit different, a little bit quirky. I think of the late General Sebastian Roberts, sadly died far too young. But when he was a young officer and going through the selection process to go to the staff college, they had to write some big operation order, and it went into about 30 pages, and there was a set way of doing it. And they had about 3 hours to do it. After half an hour, he walked out of the exam room, having written his operation order, and he handed in one page, and it was a pictorial operation order. So he had diagrams with arrows and where they were and timings, and a few lines at the top and a few lines at the bottom. And it was so brilliant that the British Army's done that ever since. You get given, they land in the helicopter, and the general hands across the one page. He goes, "Do that," and you go, "Right, got it." It requires that certain amount of thinking, and roughly what their intent is, and you get on to it. So you made me smile. I think the follow-on really is, to what extent do we overvalue exam performance and undervalue potential? I mean, it's partly you've answered it, but is there any more you thought about that?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think, well, look, I have very funny views about admissions generally, which I don't impose on any of the institutions I've been part of. I mean, my view is, at the end of the day, the education we're providing is a public good. It's also a private good, but it is a public good. And so in building our classes, we have a responsibility to make sure that the class is a reflection of the society. Really challenging at LSE because we are an actual global institution, but nevertheless. So that means the first and foremost thing is the diversity. Now, why do you care about getting kids who have done very well? Is because most of the learning students do is from each other. It's not from their teachers. Their teachers set things up, but it's in those conversations where they don't even realize how much they're learning from each other, just talking about stuff. And so, when you have a class of people who are all really, really strong, they learn more from each other. So that's a reason, as long as you have adequate diversity, to also try and have, whereas the other way we think about it is it's some kind of reward that you get for having scored well on tests, then you get to go to a better school. That just never really made sense to me as a way to think about allocating this public good. Nevertheless, that is how it's been structured for a very long time. And remember, that started out as a way to defeat the earlier system where it was actually completely a product of class privilege. So here was a way to provide admissions where actually really, really deserving people who were not from the right class could get in.
Yeah.
And that made total sense. But now we learn and believe that, that quality itself isn't necessarily distributed in the right way that we want. And that kind of performance isn't necessarily the only criteria for getting in. So can we think about this more broadly? And that's what we're trying to do. And as I say, it's hard to do in the UK because you don't actually get the information. And it's proved hard to do in the US because it led to gaming by the parents, because they started with their kids when they're little.
Yeah.
And then by the kids themselves as they grow older. So again, you can't necessarily, you're not sure whether what you're seeing is the true person.
Yeah. And it's interesting in my own personal experience with 3 daughters that one went to Cambridge, one went to Bristol, and one went to Bangor. And as I worked with the CEO of the Higher Education Academy, as it was called, and his frustration was always with the elite universities, that he was trying to get them to increase their level of quality of teaching, but they were more interested in the papers and they didn't want to actually play ball with him so much. He found it harder. And that the ones at Cambridge and Bristol found in their sessions with their tutors, there was more of them thinking for themselves and, as you say, learning from each other. Whereas at Bangor, there was actually quite a lot of teaching and actually, trying to lift people rather than just accept you are already brilliant, just carry on doing what you're doing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't know that I have strong thoughts. I mean, I think the question would be whether it's not a question of how good you are, wherever you are, whether the best way to get you better is by feeding you or by forcing you or helping you to learn how to learn for yourself. My inclination is generally in the latter direction. So I wouldn't be teaching differently. The level you start at has to be where your students are, but the way to get them up to higher levels is still going to be to challenge them.
Yeah. And there's always the need to change and reforming, let's call them elite institutions. In your experience, who or what unintentionally holds universities back from the real change that you think is needed? And why is it so hard to reform institutions full of these brilliant people, these cats that you're trying to hurt?
Yeah. Well, part of it is because they're full of brilliant people, which means they're full of people who are really, really smart and think they know better than you on everything. Um, because they're used to knowing better, and because their ability to reason even about things they're just hearing about is really strong, and because their training has been to become critical thinkers. So, if you put an idea out, they'll immediately go to the problems with it, and then they'll talk themselves into thinking they're the right problem. So that's certainly a big part of it, and some of it is, usually they've worked really hard to say, if it's their classes and what they're teaching, to get it to a place where they feel good about it. So they don't really want to change it because they think it's good and right.
Yes.
And so, if they'll change it as little as they have to, as opposed to as much as they can often. And again, it's a totally natural reaction. The biggest reason, though, quite frankly, and here's a difference between the UK and the US. In the US, the difference can be you have these other constituency, and particularly donors, and government, all these outside constituencies who have their own views about what you can't do, what you should and shouldn't do, and you have to worry about them as you think about change. In the UK, the problem is you have no resources. Right. I mean, the UK, it's a miracle how good the UK universities are, given how incredibly resource constrained they are. And then the stories people in the government and outside have told themselves that we're not. I mean, it's like, oh, no, they're all spending their money on building fancy buildings, which I can't say for every university, but all the ones I know, including this one, you're not building fancy buildings. You are creating new spaces because the way you're supposed to teach has changed. And you need spaces program. I can't deliver a program without space suited to it. And as the expectation has grown that classes should be smaller, that you need to use technology in teaching, all of these things happen. You have to reconfigure your space, and you still have no resource, and you have to. That's pivotal. You can't do it with it. And then if you want to do anything else, so we're incredibly resource constrained, and that's a huge holdback from being able to be innovative and experimental and really flexible.
Which actually leads me nicely into my next question about the UK, the government, the economy. If Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves asked you for 3 bold economic policies to unlock UK growth over the next decade, what would you recommend?
Well, I'm not although it is the London School of Economics. Remember, I'm a lawyer, so I'm not an economist, okay? But, I talk to a lot of both economists and actually, people who invest in businesses, people doing startups and so on. So, one routine theme you hear, which is undoubtedly true, is it's really hard to start and grow a business in the UK. There's too much regulation. Now, the answer to that isn't let's just get rid of regulation. We need to think about what's smart regulation. And there's lots of regulation that actually will empower businesses, just like lots of rules that restrain you from doing something actually free you, right? But the question is, are the regulations that we have ones that facilitate and encourage the growth of business or not? There is a tendency I find in the UK and in Europe. Now here, it's probably as an American, although I'm not a conservative particularly, but to have a kind of perfectionism fear. So there's one case out of 100 that could go wrong. So we better regulate to prevent that one from going wrong without thinking a whole lot about the burdens you put on the other 99 where nothing was going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So that cost-benefit balance, I think, in the UK has been very much struck in favor of worrying about edge cases, and so making core cases more difficult. And the core cases there are business growth. Yeah. And much of what they're doing isn't getting to that problem. So, last year, London had the second largest number of startups in the world after San Francisco.
Wow. Yeah.
More than New York, more than Boston, more than Chicago, more than any other city in the world. And the startups start here and then they go to the US to get the funding and grow for the reasons that I've talked about. So if we want to compete, we need to think about that. Second, and the UK government is starting to do this, is smart industrial policy. It's smart investment in the things that can grow businesses. So investments in infrastructure. But of course, again, you run into regulation. So a lot of the infrastructure growth is too slow or inhibited in ways, because of that. So I may only have two suggestions.
That's okay.
I'm not sure if I have a third one off the top of my head, but it's create an environment that's more facilitative of business investment and growth, and do more investment, not directly in businesses. They're doing some of that. I'm not sure government's particularly good at that. Some of that is good, though. They might be, but in building the infrastructure for it.
Yeah. And it is interesting when you look at the philosophy, the color of the particular party, that many of my business clients are saying that they've found it very hard to grow their businesses. While it's admirable to have a minimum wage and make it higher and higher and have extra taxes added in and have the government regulate for affordability, the cost of eggs in supermarkets, that level of control, almost going towards more Stalinist side, is actually constraining them and costing them a lot.
Yeah. Though I want to push back a little, because I think some of the things that the businesses offer, like minimum wages, not actually true. There's a huge amount of data that shows that minimum wages are not an inhibitor of business growth if you compare pieces where they put in places where they haven't.
Right.
So that's what I mean about smart regulation. This is what we can do at a university, which is really good empirical research on actually which regulations help and which regulations don't, and what's myth, because there's a theory that tells you it's supposed to work that way, and what isn't. And so, as I say, I think if you dig closely, you can do a lot of the things that people on the left or Labor Party want to do without inhibiting business growth. But there's other kinds of things that maybe we're not doing, and vice versa.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that the conservatives will do or free up don't actually particularly contribute to growth or contribute to bad growth while imposing massive costs on people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's fascinating as we look to the future. There's another topic that you are very interested in, as I am, which is AI work and the future. So let me just ask you a question on that. If AI dramatically increases productivity but reduces the need for human labor, what should universities be preparing young people for that they're currently not?
Well, first, universities have to help think through a way to use AI for all it's worth that doesn't have that effect. Okay, I mean, it would be a disaster for society to have a technology displace labor without creating new labor. And of course, unlike prior technologies, AI is adaptable. Other technologies, they were fixed technologies, so they would displace a certain kind of work but create new jobs. In the case of AI, the new jobs that might get created, it can presumably learn how to do. And if our focus remains just on anything that advances productivity and efficiency, AIs are always going to be more productive and efficient than people, period.
Yeah.
So we need to, first thing the universities can do is think hard about what kind of economic policies can we get where we can still capture many or most of the benefits of growth, but think not just about people as consumers and wanting to bring down price for them, but also what we need to do for people as workers.
Yeah.
Because we know what will happen in our societies if we have, it's not even massive unemployment, and throwing a universal basic income at people, not going to address that, right? People are going to want to do something that they feel gives their life some meaning and purpose.
Yes.
And work is that for most people. And I should say, even if the work itself isn't what's meaningful is the fact that they have to work in order to provide for their family or their children or their community. So we can't take that away from people.
Yeah.
Okay, in the interim, while we figure that out, though, obviously AI is changing what it is that we need to teach. And there's two changes that are taking place. We need to think about what we need to teach people, and that requires getting a real firm understanding about what's happening to their jobs out there. And then once we know that, we need to think about changes in how we teach them. Now, your question is really on the first part, on the what. And what I would say is, for the moment, the move that we're seeing is the move you would expect, which is what are the we refer to them as trans-substantive qualities. So it's not narrow technical training, but just capacities that will serve you well in any kind of position. So, critical thinking, problem solving, learning to learn, communication, collaboration, learning from failure. That cluster we need to provide that for students. We're also hearing, as AIs pick up a lot of the technical things, they don't need those skills so much. They need people skills more. Who can I put in front of a client? Who can talk to people? Who can work with other people? That's collaboration and so on. But of course, those are things we should always have been teaching anyway, and I think have always fancied that we were teaching. Some new things that are beginning to emerge on the teaching side, since what they're going to do in their jobs using AI is build things. So, a few people said to me, we need students who have learned how to build things with AI. So when they come for their job, there's a portfolio of they can show us what they've. So what used to be what we've learned would be just substantive knowledge that you can speak. Now they're going to want to see things that you built. And that actually made a lot of sense to me. So that may, as we absorb that, change how we think about doing assessment. Right. So tests maybe should require students to build things with AI, whatever. So, but I think thinking farther down the road, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Is the real answer. So we're going to have to.
And just saying that, Larry, I'm thinking if only UCAS would have a selection process where it goes, show us 3 things you've built using AI before you come to university, like that they're thinking about it already.
Yeah, they may get there. Now, of course, a challenge there, by the way, is access. So, we at LSE, we've made, partnerships with AI companies so that we can guarantee that everyone at the school will have access. Some people may have money to buy something more, but at least there's an access that everybody has to high quality, first class AI. You can't know that that's true before here. So you'd have to worry about something like that in terms of its differential effects. But you could compensate for that in some way. And eventually it will be part of standard education. What I'm thinking right now, what we need to do is keep in constant touch with the people who are employing our students so that we can follow the changes as they come. We're going to have to be nimble and adaptive for a while. We can't just fix on something and wait until the full changes take place because it'll be too late then to start making the changes ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's really fascinating. Well, look, penultimate question, and then we'll do the top tip. Larry, what belief have you changed your mind about most in the last 10 years?
Gosh, the reason I hesitate is, in one sense, I feel like I've changed my mind about almost everything over the last 10 years. But and over 10 years, over a slightly longer period of time, I think what has become most important to me is recognition that what matters is making progress, is getting something done. I sometimes say now, like, being right is never enough. And sometimes it's not even important. Sometimes it's not even relevant because the opposite of being right isn't necessarily being wrong. There may be many ways to do something. And even if I'm right about the best way to do something, if I lock in on that, I may end up getting nothing done. So many people today, so much of what we see, performative, not in the sense of what matters to me is that I show you who I am. That's more important than making progress. Or, when I was at Hewlett, I used to have this talk that I would give about the world has too many no loafers, people for whom no loaf is better than a half. And what we really need are half loafers. Half a loaf is always better than none if what you care about is moving things forward and making the world better. So I would say that has become more and more a central part of how I think about everything over the years. And that is definitely a product of leadership when you have that kind of responsibility. And I think maturity.
Yeah. I'm going to stay with that one, the no loafers and the half loafers. I do love that as just a theme to hang out. Yeah, I've seen that polarization and that nihilism. Let's go now for the top tip. If you'd kindly introduce yourself, what you're doing now, what you've done in the past, and give us your best leadership advice you've ever received.
Sure. So my name is Larry Kramer. I am currently the president and vice chancellor at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Before that, I was the president of the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Before that, the dean of Stanford Law School. And before that, a legal academic at a number of different universities, law professor. The best advice I ever got for leadership positions was presented to me as make sure you have nuanced relationships with your staff. And I didn't understand what that meant when I got the advice and came to understand it over time. And what it meant was simply this: if you're in a leadership role, you're going to have to make decisions that people don't like and that they're going to get angry at you about. And if you're in the role for a long time, you're going to do a lot of that. And if you don't have three-dimensional relations with the people you work with, if it's just all about the work, you're going to lose them over time, and it's going to get harder and harder to make things happen. And so you have to have relationships that are not just about work. Ways to talk and things you share that are not just about that. So you have something to fall back on when you disagree. And I found that to be incredibly important. And it relates to the corollary to it, which is the job is about people. It's about humans and not about the institution. I mean, it is about the institution, but the best way to make the institution its best is to remember that you have people. So I've seen in universities where something happens to somebody or somebody does something, and in the interest of the university would be to throw that person under the bus or get them out of the way, protect your reputation. But if it's somebody who's given 30 or 40 years to the institution, you owe them that loyalty. And so you should put them first. Likewise, for me, the leadership in all these roles has been I have control of resources, and my job is essentially to make those resources available to enhance other people's work. And there's so many ways that you get to do that, some of which are just about the job and some of which are personal. And doing the personal ones matters because at the end of the day, the feel of the institution, the culture of it is very much affected by its humanness in that way. And so what may seem in the instant like you're using the resources of the institution for something that's not directly about the mission of the institution but this is about the mission of the institution because it's, that way. So those are the things to me, as I say, it's not one tip, it's two closely related tips.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Steve. Well, Professor Larry Kramer, thank you very much for being on the Inspiring Leadership podcast. Good luck with your work at LSE and continuing to make a difference in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure to be here, and I really enjoyed this a lot.
Thanks, Larry.